spend with you. So here I am to worship. Here I am to bow down. Here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy.
Friendship. Page 69 of the songbooks. What a Friend We Have in Jesus is a song that we sing. On the overhead, you can see a little snippet from a song that Carole King wrote and was sung by her and appeared on, I believe it was her Tapestry album, but I think James Taylor did a commendable job as well. When you're down and troubled, you need a helping hand, and nothing seems to be going right. Close your eyes and think of me. Soon I will be there to brighten up even your darkest night. Ain't it good to know you've got a friend? I'm kind of jealous of Al because Al's got friends that he's had since childhood. Before too long, he's going to be back in Cherokee. And he's going to see those friends again. They're going to relive old times, share them, laugh. Be enjoyable for him. Many of you also have friends that you've had since childhood. I don't. And you look at it and go, well, I understand. Who'd want to be your friend for that long? But life changes. And I did have friends, but I became a Christian. And that changed a lot of things. And now I've had friends I guess you could say for a lifetime as well. Because once we put on Christ in the waters of baptism, we emerge to walk in newness of life. And so I have a new life. And so, yes, I've had friends for a lifetime in that regards. Some of those friends live in Oregon. Some live here in California, Washington, Missouri, Texas, all across the United States. Ain't it good to know you've got a friend? Al was talking about the ride that he and Janice are going to be taking. And in my mind, I was thinking, if I were going to take that ride, I would stop here and visit so-and-so. I would drop in at Blackfoot, Idaho. And after I had the free baked potato with all the fixings, I would go and see another friend. Friendship. Something that we hold near and dear. Something that we long for. Friend is used, depending on which translation. It's used over 100 times in the pages of the scripture. It's something that is emphasized greatly. But I want us to go back into Proverbs, 17th chapter and verse 17, wherein we find there, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. A friend is someone that is loved and is trusted deeply. If you look at the definition for friend in Webster's dictionary, a supporter, a sympathizer, a person who knows, likes, and trusts us. That's a monumental statement. Who trusts us even though they know us. And even though they know us, they like us. You long know that I have likened Mike and Susan Odorizzi to some of our dearest friends. It amazes me that they are our friends. They know us and seemingly like us, even though they know Linda. And I keep wondering why people like us once they get to know Linda. But I know she's not the problem. Quite honestly, I am. So, what does it take for me to realize that I have to try harder to be a friend, to embrace that concept of what friendship is? And know that it is so traumatic when a friend turns his back on a friend. If you go into the book of Psalms and you look at the 55th Psalm, the psalmist there talks about the betrayal of a friend. But for the sake of time, let's go over to the 4th chapter of Ecclesiastes. Look down at verse 9. Solomon trying to teach his children relative to what life is about. And he writes, 2 are better than 1 because they have good return for their labor. For if either of them falls, the one will lift up his companion. But woe to the one who falls when there is not another to lift him up. Furthermore, if 2 lie down together, they keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? And if one can overpower him who is alone, 2 can resist him. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly torn apart. He's talking about friendship. He's talking about the power of 2 as opposed to 1. He's talking about being woven together. And we realize how important we need one another. We need to grasp and hold on to what a true friend really is. Even as I was reading that, I thought back to younger years. I thought back to hitchhiking. And a friend and I, when our cars broke down, we'd hitchhike up north into Oregon, Washington, even across the United States. And there'd be times where I was glad that I had a companion. Some nefarious person would pick us up, pull a knife on us. And that was not very pleasant. But when there was 2 of us, we were able to escape fairly much without danger. Being thrown out of a car in the middle of the night in a snowstorm, to have another there, we weathered the storm. We need friends. And as Christians, we have friends. And we pull them close. And friendship is more than acquaintanceship. In class this morning, we were talking about having something bad to say about somebody. And the thought was, well, you don't really know me. But see, that's what friendship is about. It's about moving beyond mere acquaintanceship. It is developing a sense of closeness. And I'm going to use a word that people misconstrue. And the word is, we build an intimacy. And we shouldn't cheapen that word. But we become close. And we hold on to that relationship. And it's precious. We all want them. We all long for friends. But the question is, are we capable of being friends with both man and God? Because therein do we find the quintessential aspect of friendship. I can be in the world. I don't need to be of the world. I can have friends that are in the world, but I don't have to partake of what they do in the world. And I can befriend the God of heaven, but I can't be friends with those that are worldly and do those things. James talks about it in this way, 3rd chapter, the wisdom from above and the wisdom from below. I want to be part of the wisdom from above, to embrace it, to accept it, and to be exactly what a friend should be, both to God and to man. Job had friends, miserable, woeful friends they were. Even his wife, Job's wife, curse God and die, she said. Now, I could look at that, and we've talked about it before, from a jaundiced standpoint. Oh, why don't you just curse God and die? Or I could look at it from a friend standpoint. I want you out of your misery. Curse God and die. Accept your fate. So it's kind of interesting when you begin to think of it. Which one did she want? Now, his other friends were quite evident. Job, you must have done something tremendously wrong to be afflicted with all that you're being afflicted. We're your friends. And so we're telling you that you've offended God somehow, some way. Acknowledge it before God. Job goes, I don't know what I did. And you haven't really told me anything. And so all the way through the book of Job, Job is defending himself. Job is appealing to God. Job is fighting off his so-called friends. They weren't friends. See, there are 4 levels of friendship. There's the acquaintance with whom you have occasional contact. There is a casual friend. That casual friend is somebody you have common interests with, but don't have the true intimacy. Close friends are those that you have mutual interests and you have mutual goals and you share various goals and aspirations. But the intimate friend is one that is committed to the development of one another. I want to lift you up. It requires the freedom to be vulnerable, to open yourself up, to confess your sins one to another. We don't do that. We're hesitant. And I have heard that repeated over and over again. I can't confess my sins to another. Why? Oh, because they're going to go tell somebody. They're going to use it against me. Well, you're never going to have a friendship like existed between David and Jonathan. And their friendship was one of true intimacy, not cheapened the way that some commentators are trying to cheapen it today. Oh, how David loved Jonathan. And they put an emphasis on love and imply something untoward. The relationship they had was precious. Each one was vulnerable. Each one shared about themselves, their thoughts, their aspirations. And there was that closeness. Now, what that grew into is something that we can take away from. Because there's a parallel. Look into the New Testament. And you see growing friendships. And friendships that are like David and Jonathan's. But David and Jonathan and the other friendships we're going to talk about are examples of how our friendship with God has to transcend that. And that our vulnerableness, that we open and expose ourselves to God in order to become a closer friend, is truly in evidence. Look at Philippians, the second chapter. Go down to verse 19. Paul writes, "But I hope in the Lord Jesus to send Timothy to you shortly, so that I also may be encouraged when I learn of your condition." Now, from this verse on, down through verse 30, Paul's talking about friends. He's talking about the friendship of Timothy and Epaphroditus. He's talking about receive him as you would receive me. I want to develop a friendship with you Philippians. And I'm sending Timothy so that he'll come back and report back to me. Abraham was said to be a friend of God. That's what James talks about in James 2 and verse 23. Think of it. Think of it. A friend of God. I mean, we know people. Sometimes Adam says, "Oh, Dad, you like to drop names." I don't. Hold on, I'm going to in a minute. But I don't consider myself as anyone. And just because I know certain persons doesn't mean that I'm anything. But for whatever reason, accolades are put and esteem is placed on any number of people. I have met a lot of people over my lifetime. People of note. People that I've said are crazy. You don't know what you're doing. And that to a governor of a state. I haven't met Governor Newsom, so haven't said anything to him directly. But George Foreman said, "I'm going to come to the Valley and we'll go have lunch." I have a picture somewhere of George Foreman and I. I realize that's just platitudes on George Foreman's part. He doesn't know me from who flung Harry in the parking lot. There have been other people I've met and known, interacted with. I mean, right now we're sitting in the presence of a major star, rising star on stage, screen, and television. Yeah, you. and I speak tongue in cheek. But people are just people. They're just people. But if they're our friend, that's something totally different. And we prize them, we hold on to them. And the only one that I really want to know and to name drop is the God of heaven, like Abraham did, like James said of Abraham. He was the friend of God, God's friend. There was a relationship that existed between Moses and God. Back in in Exodus 33, verse 11. Would that we had a relationship like that? But as the writer of Hebrews said, God in times past spoke to the fathers and prophets in divers manners and divers ways. But in these last days has spoken to us in his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things. He goes on to then say, he is the exact representation of his nature, who upholds all things with the word of his power. And he's talking about Jesus, who is the Christ. And Jesus, he's the one that said, I want to befriend you. I want to befriend you. But before we get to that, look back at Proverbs 18:34. It's on the overhead. There's a friend who sticks closer than a brother. I am closer to those in the body of Christ than I am to many members of my family. And I count that as a reason because there is one who sticks closer than a brother. Although in Hebrews 2nd chapter, he's said to be my brother. He had to be made like his brethren in all things. And again, it's referring to the Christ. Well, in the night in which he was taken and betrayed, Jesus pointed out greater love has no one than this. Then one laid down his life for his friends. John 15, verse 13. You are my friends, verse 14, if you do as I command you. There is one who wants to befriend all of mankind. And he wants to do something and has done something that is far and away greater than anything else that could have been done. Lay down his life for us. He took that step while we were helpless. Now, again, I'm not going to say this for accolades, but I have had a close friend. And the way that I got his friendship, and Linda knows him, but he was a little weaselly guy. And people picked on him. 6th or 7th grade. And I saw him being picked on one day. Then I didn't know him, other than he was in a class I had. And I am not a pugilist. I don't like violence. But I couldn't tolerate seeing anybody bully anybody else. So I went over and just simply said, if you're going to deal with him, you're going to deal with me. It was a lot of talk and bluster, but it worked. And I put myself on the line for him. And then I couldn't get rid of him for the next 15, 20 years. He was always there. He was a constant. But it was okay. And I was glad that I did it. What God did for us, sent his Son for us, to bear the price for us, to befriend us, is monstrative. Go back into the book of, well, go back into Romans, the 5th chapter, because that begins to talk about while we were helpless. Beginning in and about verse 10. But I think it starts even earlier. Verse 6. We were still helpless. At the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. For one will hardly die for a righteous man, though perhaps for the good man, someone would dare even to die. But God demonstrates his own love toward us, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Enemies, combatants. That's what we were. And God said, I'm going to send you my son. And he's going to be made like you. Hebrews 2. And although he was a son, he learned obedience from the things which he suffered. And having become perfect, he became to all those who obey him the source of eternal salvation. Okay, so blended together. Christ took the step for us. He stood up to the bully, if you would. He died for us in order that we might have a chance. And he said, I'm going to do this because I love you. And if you want to be my friend and benefit, all you have to do is obey me. Do as I ask. He took the first step and the second step and many steps. And he's asking us if we're willing to follow those steps. Now, there's not as many steps as envisioned on the overhead, but it is an upward ascendancy. We take that step in order to befriend Christ, to then be able to be called the friend of God. Are you willing to take the steps that will move you beyond acquaintanceship? I'm not a fan of Facebook or whatever it's calling itself these days. And I know as a congregation, we have a Facebook page. And I know a lot of things are posted to it. And I'm told you need to go and check the messages. But I think anybody on there's just more of an acquaintance. And I have a Facebook page. Linda did it when Facebook first came out 1,000,000 years ago. And at first people would say, I want to be your friend. And I would say, why? And then I would either respond or I've got people that have wanted to be my friend since I lived in Yakima, and former students. Why would they want to be my friend? I offer them nothing. They don't have to turn in term papers to me any longer. And then I realized what both Adam and Linda told me, there's an algorithm. And that a lot of Be My Friend stuff is generated by Facebook itself. And I began to realize that when I started getting friend requests from people that I know had died. Now, talk about reaching back from the grave. And I go, oh, yeah, there must be some to that. But see, that request of Christ to befriend him is open-ended. Open-ended. If you will obey me, you'll benefit from my shed blood. And you know what? I will never desert you or forsake you. I would that that friend who I stood in and helped him that day would have remained my friend. But when he found out I was a Christian, that ended the friendship. And I've reached out to him a couple of different times. Wants nothing to do with me. That's all right. I want to be a friend of God. I will not compromise that because I realize that in that relationship that I have hope, that I have a mediator. Go back into the book of Matthew, into the 11th chapter. And in the 11th chapter, look down at verse 28. And this gives me such great comfort. Come to me. Come to me. I like that. I like that. Come to me. All who are weary, heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Learn from me. Let's chew on that word, learn for a minute. There's something that I can take away from that relationship with Christ. I'm going to be able to learn from him. Isn't that part of what we read a little while ago or talked about? We talked about the various forms of friendship. And where it gets to that level, we're in the friendship. Where did that paper go? There it is. That intimate friends. The freedom to be vulnerable as well as correct each other. I cannot correct the God of heaven, but I can learn from him and I can be corrected by him. I can be committed to the development that he would want and have me to do. That's the type of friendship I want. So I can learn of him and learn from him. For I am gentle and humble in heart. You shall find rest for your souls. The weekend, Linda and I went to India. I was burned out, literally. 115 million degrees outside. Ay, ay, ay. And even a trip to the homemade ice cream store did not abate that. So I laid my head down on the bed. And Linda took a video of me. And I was snoring. And she goes, "You want to see something?" I go, "What?" I was at rest with her. No pretense. Familiarity. Shared openness. At peace. That's what we can have spiritually. That can then translate over to the betterment of our life. That's what I want. You find rest for your souls. My yoke is easy and my load is light. That's what I want. And you know what? I'd like you to have it too. I went to school to be a psychologist. Well, that's what I ended up going to school for. I started out going as political science journalism major. Thought I was going to join the Fourth Estate and expose all the corruptness that is in the world. Then I thought, no, I better become a lawyer. That lasted all of about semester. I become a doctor. That lasted a lot longer until I went into the cadaver room. And that was the end of that. Become a psychologist. You can still heal people. You can still deal with people. You can still give people the peace they want. And at some point during that time of thinking that way, I became a Christian and saw what people really need can be found from the wonderful counselor. And that wonderful counselor is Christ. And he said, I want to be your friend. And he said, it's so easy. All you have to do is obey. That's all you need to do, is obey. Now, the song you can see that Dan's got is number 280. Great song. We're going to sing that in a minute. But I want you to turn over to number 69. Are y'all my friends? Good. Then I'll try to lead this. I'm going to ask Brittany to turn off the lavalier mic because I don't want the people on. What faith we have in Jesus, all our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. Oh, what needs we often forget. Oh, what needless pain we bear. All because we do not carry everything to God in prayer. Every trials and temptations, is there trouble everywhere? We should never be discouraged. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Can we find a friend so faithful, who will all our sorrows share? Jesus knows our every weakness. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Are we weak and heavy laden? Covered with a load of care. Precious Savior, still our refuge. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Do thy friends despise, forsake thee? Take it to the Lord in prayer. In his arms he'll take and shield thee. Thou wilt find a solace there. Thank you for bearing with me on that. Okay, Brittany, lavalier back on. Look at the last part of that song. Thou will find a solace there. You've got a friend that is available to you, a friend that died for you. All you have to do is befriend him. That's to those that have never put him on in the waters of baptism. Everything's ready. Just all it takes is you. But then there are those of us that have already put him on, have already befriended him. But maybe we need to have a reconciliation. Come back into league with him. However we can be of assistance spiritually, we'd invite you to come while we stand and sing number 2.